So, last week was a bit intense, was it? I proved that the kit MoQ was a linear digital EQ with non-analog phase. Kit went on the defensive. I got mobbed on gear sluts as per usual for being right. And even Colt Caparoon chipped in and decided that he disagreed with everything in my video, even though everything I showed was based on science, not based on which Grammy winner used it. Pretty standard week at the office then for Paul Third. Yeah, nothing new, but to be honest, I couldn't give a monkey's arse about plugin devs, gear slut boys throwing the dummy out the pram, and yes, even Colt Caparoon dodging science because he has a few Grammy friends, which I do too, but who actually gives a shit, eh? Because what I do care about is my audience, and some of my audience were talking about how as much as my dB increment matching of Kit's Motown EQ with Kirchhoff did get inaudible results, it wasn't very useful from a workflow element, especially as each frequency had its own preset and it wasn't a constant Q. So I decided to think about if there was a way of going one step further. What if I could find a way of creating my own proportional Q similar to that of Kit's MoQ in an easy-to-use GUI that you could simply load and get that instant workflow? And not only that, create my own custom non-linearity and even have more realistic phase in the process without using stupidly high sample rates, and it not even cost me a penny. I only went and did it, did I? Because for once, I actually have a benefit in being a Waves owner, would you believe it? As they implemented macros in their studiorack plugin. Now, for anybody that doesn't know, studiorack is completely free and it's a tool that you can use to create custom chains for your Waves plugins. Now, for this example, I'm going to utilise all of studiorack's 8 custom macros which you can use to change certain parameters of plugins to one knob, which is called a macro. Now, before I show you this, quick disclaimer, I am in no way claiming that this preset is a Motown EQ. I am not saying that it's a one-to-one identical match of Kit's MoQ, and I am in no way stating that I have made a perfect Waves recreation of Blackbird's Motown EQ. So with that out the way, let me show you my Waves studiorack preset that I have very aptly named Motownish. I could feel their faces burning already. And it's really just as simple as taking a Waves Q8, which is their old standard linear digital EQ, and matching up curves in plugindoctor. You can start by simply linking the gain, frequency and Q of a band to a macro, and then set your minimum and maximum values to match that of each kit band. It's really easy. All you do is max out the gain of each kit band, set the frequency, find the right max dB value in Q8, set that as your maximum gain level, and do the same for the max Q factor as well. All you now need to do is genuinely follow the same procedure and you'll have 7 bands of fixed EQ with a proportional Q. Now, what's even cooler about Waves studiorack's macro function is that you can adapt the speed and timing of each parameter. You can do this with the Q, so the proportional Q stays wider for longer and then starts to narrow at a certain gain level. And you can do the opposite and make it narrow sooner, etc, etc. Now, to get my Waves macros closer to the Kit's MoQ proportional Q, I did have to adjust the timing, but I will tell you right now that I cannot 100% recreate MoQ's proportional Q behaviour, but I can get extremely close, as you can see here. I can nail the start of the proportional Q, get the middle right, and then recreate the tail end of the Q, but it's almost like Motown's proportional Q is two-staged, where I can get it right to a certain level, but then it adapts again. But as you can see, now sped up, I was able to find what I call an average proportional Q for all 7 bands, which is going to get you a Motown-ish sound. Now you'll notice that the 12.5k band isn't right due to Waves EQ cramping, which Kit has tried to solve via oversampling, which, as we showed last week, is the reason why the phase isn't right and not accurate to the hardware. Now, Waves doesn't suffer from the high-end phase roll-off, but does want to tuck back to Nyquist, which can easily be fixed by sticking the studiorack preset through metaplugin and selecting a x2 FIR oversampling filter, which fixes the EQ cramping and results in phase that isn't an absolute mess. Not perfect still, but way better than using Kit at 48 or 96 kHz. So as we can see, my proportional cue is not exact 100% behaviour, but are we really going to argue about this when we are talking saving $80?
Really?
Because to pin it back to the moaners of my previous video,
If it sounds good, it sounds good. Right?
well, what about if we were to make it sound a little bit better and add in some of that analog non-linearity that we are missing from the kit MoCue, as we all know that it's a completely digital linear EQ. Now, as I am not creating an exact replica of the Motown EQ, I can simply now just do what I want and go with what sounds good. So I decided to add in the optional pass-through of the Abbey Road TG12345, which as you can see, gives us some lovely harmonic mojo, which also interacts with the EQ moves, giving us some extra custom non-linearity as well as some extra tone shaping, which includes a nice little high-pass filter, which is great as I liked what the UED Motown high-pass filter did to the low end. Now, originally I made a preset in a way where the drive macro controlled the drive function of the TG12345 for extra distortion, but I decided to try something a little bit more analogy, which involved boosting the input to drive the harmonics a little harder, like you would in a transformer-based unit, but linking the output in a negative fashion to compensate for the level increase. Almost like my own auto gain function. Now, it's not perfect, and I did need to adjust the timing of the output reduction to get a more auto gain-like functionality, but in most cases, it's only like 0.3, 0.4 of a dB out, which is close enough for me when I'm mixing. Now, I'll also say that I found all of this out on the last day of my kit trial, so I genuinely was fighting against the clock, but I did have just enough time to run a very quick pink noise null test, which as you can see, just on the first two bands, can cancel out from any real audible aspect. Nothing past minus 75 dB full scale. The only main difference is in the high end, which we know is caused by kits oversampling, as they don't know how to deal with EQ cramping without skewing the phase. And know what? Even though it's practically the same, who actually cares? In the end, I quite like my little studiorack preset. And you know what? Here's what I managed to conjure up quickly on kick and bass. I'll show you the functions working and then do a level matched A-B for both. And there you go. Who would have thought that you would have been able to create your own custom plugins? I now have my own easy-to-use 7-band Motown-inspired EQ with proportional Q with my own custom non-linearities. I can change the frequencies if I want, gain structure, proportional Q behaviour, and even change the analog flavour to another one of my other Waves emulations. Instead of the TG12345, I could use the colour of an LE3A, DBX, Fairchild, etc, etc. You get what I mean. The possibilities are pretty endless if you have quite a few Waves plugins. So let's not kid ourselves here. You just don't need to buy certain plugins. Plugindoctor's like 30 quid and you can load instances of Wave studiorack and another plugin which you can then match and save as a studiorack preset within Doctor. I've done this to show you that you genuinely have way more control than you actually believe. You aren't fixed to hardware recreations. You can take what you like from a new emulation plugin and implement that into what you've already got. Why do we constantly want to keep shelling out money on stuff that we can mostly recreate ourselves? The visuals are there to be copied, and your plugins are there to be utilised. Don't be bound to the limitations of analog emulations. Get creative and put your money into other things. Take what you like and go further. Having said that, however, there are certain plugins that are just really well coded, and that's why we have awesome plugin developers. Not everything can be recreated, but as I said, does it really have to be? We don't need things to be exact. The only people that do are the people making the claims that it's fucking exact, because that's how they sell their plugins. All we need as engineers is usable tools that give us another option while working. And you know what? You may just surprise yourself at how much money a little bit of working time can save you in the long run. And by the way, for those moaning that Kit's exact proportional Q is the thing that sets it apart from other plugins, you do know that there are other plugins that go way, way further than Waves. Actually, here is the exact proportional Q of MoQ using Melda M Auto Dynamic EQ. And for those wondering how that's possible, let's just say that you are going to be seeing a lot more of Melda on this channel. Heck, you might even see some custom plugins with my own little custom GUIs. Yes, it is finally time to show how geeky the Melda guys truly are. And trust me, the rabbit hole goes deep with these guys. If you know, then you know. And if you don't know, then prepare to buckle in and I'll see you when I see you.
Obama out.